Welcome to Schmidt Paleo Lab. I'm Lindsay, and today I'm going to tell you about my master's thesis project titled Reconstructing Surface Water Carbonate Ion Concentration Changes in the Eastern Equatorial Pacific Across Glacial Transitions. Wait, what does that even mean? The ocean plays a huge role in regulating global climate, absorbing nearly 30% of atmospheric carbon dioxide, or CO2, but some regions actually release CO2 to the atmosphere. The Eastern Equatorial Pacific, or the EEP, releases more CO2 to the atmosphere today than any other region of the ocean. But there's evidence that this might not have always been the case, suggesting that the region may have actually absorbed CO2 in the past due to rapid changes in climate. Has the EEP always released CO2, and could that change in the near future with climate change? To answer this question, we must look at how the EEP responded to dramatic climate shifts in the past in order to understand how it might respond in the future. We can do this by using the fossils of marine microorganisms called foraminifera, or forams for short. Forams are as small as a grain of sand but can reconstruct climate history. Forams make calcium carbonate shells using dissolved carbon and bits of other elements in the ocean in which they form. By understanding relationships between the bits within the foram shells and the chemistry of the ocean, you can analyze the shells that lived in the past and reconstruct the ocean chemistry. Kind of like how you might make your house from logs if you lived in the woods, or from a bamboo and grass hut if you lived on a tropical island. We can look at the shells of fossilized forams and understand what the ocean was like when they built their shell. Before I go any further, I need to tell you a little bit about a really important element called carbon. Carbon dissolved in the ocean changes into different forms that are all closely linked, particularly CO2, carbonic acid, bicarbonate, and carbonate ion. In my research, I used the shells of forams to reconstruct carbonate ion in the EEP across two glacial transitions in the past, or times when the Earth went from an ice age into a warmer period, or vice versa. Because CO2 and carbonate ion are closely linked, reconstructing carbonate ion in the ocean allows me to understand if this region was absorbing or releasing CO2 across these time periods. I first looked from 96 to 60,000 years ago, the last time when the Earth went from a warmer period into an ice age. I then looked at 25,000 years ago to present, when the Earth moved from the last ice age into the present warm period. To analyze the foram shells, I first ordered sediment that was collected at the bottom of the seafloor in the EEP. I washed away all the dirt to leave only the fossils, spent hundreds of hours on a microscope picking out thousands of fossils one by one, cleaned them with toxic chemicals that could literally explode if I had done it wrong, and pulverized them with temperatures hotter than the sun to analyze their shells. It's an intense process. Once I knew the content of their shells, I used two known relationships between the bits in the foram shells and the amount of carbonate ion in the ocean. First, I used the relationship between carbonate ion and how much boron was in the foram shell. Then, I used another relationship between carbonate ion and the amount of two different types of carbon in the shells. My results suggested that the EEP released more CO2 across the 96 to 60,000 year climate change than today, and released as much or more across the climate change from 25,000 years ago to present. This suggests that despite the rapid changes happening within our global climate, the EEP may continue to release CO2 in the future. Thank you so much for listening, and please leave any questions or comments you have below. If you liked what you learned, subscribe to Schmidt Paleo Lab and stay tuned for upcoming videos on current paleoclimate research and other climate topics.